Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're going to talk all things MSU and Ole Miss here for the next half hour or so. We've been on a bit of an inconsistent schedule this spring with basketball travel and family situations. Logan, we hadn't been here every week, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's been kind of, you and I have talked on the phone and texted quite a bit over this span, but I guess our listeners hadn't heard from us, at least from the podcast side of things. So it's good to be back, and I guess it's a good timing for us to be back. Yeah, it seems like the two schools that we cover are playing each other in multiple sports over the next coming days.
That's right. You talk about you and me texting and whatnot. Back in the day at the Daily Journal, there was a Friday staff meeting every Friday at like 1 o'clock, right after lunch, that Gene Phelps, who was the sports editor then, would lead, and we would all show up for the staff meeting. And in these days, a staff meeting is a group text between you, me, and John Pitts, and that's kind of how we stay in touch. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. I would call that a plus in the area of technology. I like that we can meet like that on the fly and kind of stay in contact and do things like that. We got the baseball series coming up this weekend, and Logan, it seems like for the last couple of years there's been something that's been a conflict with me. This time it's graduation. I've got my son graduating at Mississippi College, so I will miss the Friday and Saturday games. I'm thankful that you're there, and I will pick up on Sunday. But it's a big softball game as well. That wasn't an easy series for Ole Miss at Starkville this year. They won big in the first game, didn't score in the second game, and I think the third game was extra innings. And those two teams will play later today, weather permitting, in the SEC tournament at Texas A&M. Ole Miss had a chance, Logan, talking about softball for a second. In the final weekend of the regular season, they were the only SEC team that had not lost a series, had not lost a conference series. The only one they didn't win was a 2-game series against South Carolina, where they were leading in the third game and the rains came. And there was a bit of mild controversy on whether to try to continue the game. And my understanding is South Carolina wasn't real interested in working to continue that game as Ole Miss was ahead 2-0 in the middle innings. So it was that's quite an accomplishment, but the Rebels were swept on the final weekend at Georgia, and that cost them that double bye in the SEC tournament. So they go in as the 5th seed, and they'll play at some point State, who defeated Texas A&M in that play-in game. That was a 12-13 game. Only 13 teams for SEC softball since Vanderbilt doesn't play. But anyway, good year for the Rebels, and of course State's got those sluggers, man, hitting all those home runs, 61 home runs on the year for State. I know they hadn't won as many games as they would like, but certainly a lot of power hitting there. Let's shift gears, talk baseball a little bit, Logan, about this series. Still a lot on the line for both of these teams. What can State accomplish with a strong finish to the regular season?
Well, yeah, State put themselves behind the 8 ball a couple of weeks ago when they got swept at Arkansas, and that kind of put them, behind as far as, trying to win the SEC outright and all those things. But they still have a lot to play for. Kind of looking at some of the, national coverage of, they do those regional projections and all those things. We see those. And, Baseball America and D1 Baseball, as of yesterday, had Mississippi State as the number 4 national seed. So, that would be huge for Mississippi State to be able to host both a regional and a super regional here at home at the New Dude. And, I'm sure the crowds would come out. I mean, it would be just an incredible atmosphere at that new stadium to kind of break that thing in postseason play for the first time. And, I tell you what, Parrish, it would be good for me too, because last year that road to Omaha went through Tallahassee and Nashville, and by the time I got to Omaha and spent all, over, I think it was about 10, 12 days up there, I was tired by the time we got home, and it took me a while to recover from just being on the road for that long. So that would be huge for Mississippi State to finish out this weekend. Going to the SEC tournament with no expectations in that thing. you see sometimes in that SEC tournament, and I think it kind of happened to Ole Miss last year. If you go on a long run in that SEC tournament, a lot of times you're out of gas by the time regional play starts. So it'd be good for Mississippi State to go ahead and seal up, a hosting bid, and go ahead, and kind of play your way out of the SEC tournament. Come home, rest up for that stretch run of postseason play. Like I said, the SEC tournament, it depends on where you're at, whether it actually means something or not. If you need wins to possibly host or need wins to get into the postseason, the SEC tournament can mean a lot for you. But if you can go ahead and have a good regular season, then the SEC tournament's not going to mean a whole lot to you.
Yeah, and I would go along with that. I think that was part of what happened to Ole Miss in a home regional last year. Bottom line is those guys just didn't hit. Didn't hit on that championship Monday against a Tennessee Tech pitcher, a few pitchers. Now, they had a good staff, they had a decent staff, but they threw out some pitchers that day who really had some weak ERAs, and the Rebels just didn't hit. I do think, you play a lot of games this time of year. That does play into it. You mentioned the SEC tournament, Logan. You just kind of reach a point in that thing where if you've won a couple of games, and it might be good to get home and rest, but it becomes a situation of, look, man, we're here. If we just win one more, we just got one more, and then all of a sudden you win the tournament. And that's what happened with Ole Miss last year. They won a couple. They got on a run, and were able to win the tournament. There's something to be said for that. There's so many different dynamics around the SEC baseball tournament than the basketball tournament. It's unusual when so many basketball teams from the conference go into the basketball tournament really confident in an NCAA bid or where they stand or that sort of thing. You're not playing for things in basketball like a home regional. You don't have that. But baseball is different. There are a lot of different dynamics in play, and maybe the tournament means a lot for you, and maybe it doesn't. So it's a different kind of event. As far as Ole Miss goes, they're not in position for a national seed right now. They have won back-to-back SEC series, pretty impressive, with a home sweep against Texas A&M, and then winning at LSU this past weekend, winning a series there for the first time since 1982. And doing it, Logan, really in dramatic fashion. I mean, look, you can remember back in the day when they had these SEC doubleheaders every weekend. The format was 2 games on Saturday and 1 game on Sunday. And I believe the second game of the doubleheader on that day was 7 innings. I think they went 9-7-9. Back then, you would hear people talk about, by the time you got around to that third game on Sunday, that everybody was out of pitching, and you expected those really high-scoring offensive games. That's not so much the case in the SEC these days. I think in the modern era, I think these teams are deeper. I think lots of times you can find teams with 3 good starters. You don't go into that third game expecting pitching to be worn out. It might be in some cases, and particularly in the bullpens, depending on how they've been used in the first 2 games. But that third game at LSU, Logan, I haven't seen anything like it in a long time. 19-15, and a combined 45 hits, 23 by Ole Miss, and the Rebels had leads of 7-0, 10-1, and then in the 9th inning, 15-6, and then got 2 quick outs in the 9th inning. Parker Caracci. And then all of a sudden, there's hit, 6 straight hits. The last 3 were home runs, and the Tigers tied it up. And I think the big thing here is Ole Miss was able to come back and win the game. So many times you see a situation like that where the team that has the momentum, the team that has had to come back and cover that ground, is the team that goes on and finishes the job and wins the game. So big series for Ole Miss. They've won 2 straight now. Big challenge with State coming in. Not in position for that national seed, Logan. They were the number 4 seed last year. Maybe that would change if they had a phenomenal finish in the SEC regular season and then maybe a tournament run. But with the RPI right now at 17, and that's just breaking that top 20 after winning the series at LSU, that's outside of national seed kind of RPI range. And you look at this team, and And while they are 15-9 right now, and that's a good spot, good position to be in going into the last 6 games, that RPI really would be a lot different if they had done a little more in their non-conference games. When you look back at the schedule right now, you had that loss to North Alabama, a head scratcher there where, Ole Miss just didn't play well, didn't hit, lost the game. North Alabama, I think, was 290, 300, something like that in the RPI. That's not a help. And they didn't pick up real big RPI non-conference wins when they had the chance to in 3 games, 2 against Louisville and 1 against East Carolina. Very challenging schedule that Ole Miss has played. They really could have helped themselves with a win there, and they weren't able to pick up one. And I look at in SEC play, Kentucky and Alabama are 2 of the lower teams in the league right now. And the Rebels were only able to go 3-3 in those games. If they had been able to go 4-2 or 5-1, again, that RPI would look a lot different. And maybe the Rebels would be playing for more. As it is, I think they have an excellent chance to play their way into host status. And that would be quite an achievement if they could finish strong against State and then close with Tennessee. Maybe a tournament run in Hoover would help that as well. But if Ole Miss can secure a regional at home, that would be 3 times in 4 years. And the big thing the Rebels need to do now, if they are able to host, is advance. Because not only were they unable to do that last year, they were not able to advance from a host regional in 2016. So, too many more of those, you're going to pick up that Florida State reputation, but the Rebels haven't advanced from a home regional since 2014 when they went on the road, won the Super Regional at Lafayette, and went on to the NCAA tournament. So lots to play for, Logan, for both of these teams this weekend and in the final 6 games. Where does State close the regular season?
They close at home against South Carolina, and obviously that's a winnable series there. But, and that's kind of where State's helped itself, what you were talking about earlier, just the non-conference. Mississippi State has lost 1 non-conference game all season, and that was a 1-0 game against Southern Miss back on the 2nd weekend of the season. They're 14-0 in midweek games, and that was kind of in jeopardy last night, Parrish. They played Memphis here at home, and Memphis scored 7 runs in the first inning. They scored 7 runs off of 2 hits. Keegan James came in the game. He walked 4 out of the first 6 batters that he faced, gave up 2 hits along with that, and next thing you know, he was out of the game without recording an out. Mississippi State trailed 7-0 without even recording an out, and they kind of chipped away at the lead, throughout the game, and actually ended up taking the lead in the 6th inning. Actually went up 8-7 at that point, and then next thing you know, Memphis scores 2 runs. The bullpen walked a couple of batters. Those guys scored. And next thing you know, they're down 9-8 again. And Mississippi State gets a big 2-run double from Elijah McNamee. He was so huge for Mississippi State in the postseason last year. He's kind of struggling here of late, but he comes through with a big hit off the 380 sign out in right center with a big double. Mississippi State ends up winning that game 10-9 last night, 14-0. And midweek play. So Mississippi State's got one more midweek game left next week against Louisiana Tech. It's kind of a game that they scheduled last week, actually. Louisiana Tech is going through some, those tornadoes that came through Ruston. Mississippi State's going to allow fans to get in that game free. And, the Salvation Army is going to be there accepting monetary donations, to help the city of Ruston. So I think that's really good for Mississippi State. Of course, Louisiana Tech coached by former Mississippi State assistant Lane Burroughs. So you're going to play 4 games next week. Got 3 games this weekend at Ole Miss. It's going to be a busy stretch for Mississippi State, leading into the SEC tournament. So it may tax some of those arms with all those games coming up in the next week or so.
I hope they can raise some money, Logan, a good amount for Louisiana Tech. That area, Ruston and the Tech campus and the city took a hard hit on that tornado recently. All right, let's talk about this series, Logan. Tell me about Ethan Small. I see the ERA 1.85, I believe, 3rd in the SEC. When teams have had success against him, obviously not a lot, how have they had success? What's gone on when they've been able to to break through against him a little bit. I know last year against Ole Miss in the series in Starkville, the only game the Rebels won was against Ethan Small. He pitched 4 innings. I think there were 8 hits, 4 runs, so not one of his better games there. How have teams attacked him this year?
Well, they really haven't. I mean, the only game that he's lost this year was against Arkansas, and that was a game where it was just a pitcher's duel, and Arkansas finally broke through. He had a no hitter going against Arkansas for 4 or 5 innings of that, and they finally kind of just had that one big inning in that game, and that's really the only bad inning he's really had all season. He doesn't walk anybody. I mean, he's got 18 walks in 73 innings this year, and his strikeout numbers are just ridiculous. 122 strikeouts in 73 innings. Teams are hitting a $155 against him. I mean, you just can't hit the guy. So I guess really the only way to get runs off of him is to hit the long ball. He throws a lot of fastballs, so you can sit dead red on a fastball and hope to time him just right. He does all those things with his motion. He pauses, and he just has so many different types of deliveries that throws the hitters off. But you can get your timing just right. He does throw a lot of fastballs, so you can kind of try to jump on one. I mean, obviously, the stadium in Oxford is a lot more home run friendly than a lot of other stadiums in the SEC. So, Ole Miss may have a chance to take one out of the yard against him. He's given up, like I said, 6 home runs in 73 innings, which is not a lot, but that's how teams have mostly scored runs against him. Six home runs, have counted. He's only given up 15 earned runs all year, so 6 of those have been via home runs. So we'll have to see, how Ole Miss. I know they got a lot of power hitters, so we'll have to see how they kind of attack him. But JT Ginn's been really good in that second starter spot for Mississippi State. Peyton Plumlee's kind of hit or miss, but he's been more hit here of late. He's pitched really well out of that third rotation spot for Mississippi State. So we'll kind of have to see how the rotation goes this weekend. They've kind of shorn up that rotation a little bit. They've kind of had some question marks for that third starter most of the year, but like I said, Peyton Plumlee's really found his way over the last couple of weekends and pitched really well. So and he pitched well against Ole Miss down in Pearl earlier this year. So Ole Miss will be seeing him for the second time this year on Sunday.
Well, you know what? You mentioned small success and how difficult teams have had against him, just breaking through. Ole Miss did a good job earlier this season, a couple of weeks ago when Texas A&M was in. They have a very talented rotation as well with John Doxakis and Asa, I forget his last name. They're what's that? Lacey, yeah. They're 4 and 5 in the ERA, right behind Small. And I thought Ole Miss in the series in Oxford did a good job of running up pitch counts and getting those guys out of the game. It didn't happen until the 7th inning against Doxakis in the first game, but the Rebels were able to finally score late, extend that game, and win in extras. And they did it against Lacey earlier in the game. Maybe it was walks. Doesn't sound like Small walks a lot of people, but just foul balls, but just doing what you can to extend the pitch counts, and that goes a long way in the latter innings if you can do that, even if you're not scoring runs early in the game. So the Rebels did a good job of that against Texas A&M. And the long ball, Logan, Ole Miss would like to see the heart of that order get going again. They'd like to see Cole Zabowski and Thomas Dillard get hot at the same time. Zabowski was 4 for 6 in that big game 3 against LSU. But before that, he had 2 hits in his last 30 at bats. So if that game could be kind of a springboard, that would be huge for the Rebels. Thomas Dillard was just 1 for 11, I believe, in that series. His 1 hit was a home run. So we'll see what they can do. The Rebels got a lot of production from other guys in the lineup. Gray Kessinger continues to hit well. He had 285 in the series at LSU, and he's now been on base 37 straight games. He leads the league in hitting in conference-only games at 436 and is around the top of a lot of other categories. So he's really played well. He was hitting just 217, Logan, back on March the 9th after struggling against UAB. So he's really come on. Tyler Keenan had a good weekend against LSU, and And really some guys, newcomers to the lineup. Jacob Adams, he played more last year. Mike Bianco's kind of settled in of late to Adams at second base and Anthony Servideo in the outfield. And one of the reasons that lineup will stick is if Adams is hitting, and he did hit in that last game against LSU. And Cooper Johnson has played well also. Had a nice weekend in Baton Rouge, and is this week's SEC Player of the Week. And when we talked with Mike Bianco yesterday, I asked him about that heart of the order, because look, the heart of the order on any team is important. No matter how good your offense is or how good you think it is, that middle of the lineup needs to produce. And if the Rebels can get that from Zabowski and Dillard, that could really create some momentum for them in the series. But he brought it back to, look, you want everybody to produce. You want everybody to produce 1 through 9, and that's what's going to be a dynamic offense. Of course, he didn't shy away from the fact that that those guys in the middle need to be better, but he'd like to see his entire offense be better. And as we mentioned, big challenge against Small and really that entire Mississippi State rotation. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today, and we'll be back next week. I think maybe we're going to be more regular, Logan. Maybe won't have as many conflicts here. What do you think?
Well, we'll see what happens. Like I said, there's so many moving parts this time of year, so we'll try to get back next week and be more on a routine basis with you guys.
Folks, thanks for being with us. Come back and join us next week.